Mary Shelley in the 19th century wrote a book about someone who created a creature and he loses control of her. Then you made a film about, but in this case it's a female character, it is a female, so it is a scientist, and she loses control of the two creatures, let's say, that she created and breeded, Joe and little Joe. He's her son and this plant flower. When did you have Frankenstein in mind when you decided to do this film?
Yes, I did, and I thought it would be interesting to have a female Frankenstein character. The film is also very much about motherhood, and I have to say that I had thought about that analogy for quite a while, that being a mother is sort of being a Frankenstein scientist, because you do create that monster, and a child is a human being that has to get out of the control of their parents, of its parents. And that experience is, I think it's very similar to that Frankenstein story, and I think it's also for that reason that it was a woman who wrote the story. I think it's a sort of translation of motherhood in a way. But then, of course, it's also a story about science. So it's not only mothers who bring children into the world, it's also scientists who bring other creatures into the world. And I find that a very interesting situation to ask yourself, is it ever possible to really keep the control over that creature that you let out into the world? And I do think it is not possible. There is always a risk of something going wrong, which no one can foresee.
Mm-hmm. And did you have, how to create this character and to develop the film? Did you have much scientific advice? How did you do it? Because this is something you're not really connected to, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm not a scientist myself.
You made a lot of research.
Yes, I did a lot of research. I always like to do that for every film. I like to find a setting which is not very close to my own experiences, but that forces me to transpose my ideas into another setting, into a different world. So for this film, I had no ideas about plant or biology at all. So I had to do a lot of research, and I met scientists, very many scientists. I interviewed them, and finally there were 3 scientists that really worked with me on the script. There was one neurologist, one plant genetist, and one human genetist. I don't know if that's the word. So I asked them, is there any believable or possible way that a plant could ever infect a human being so that that human being changes? And they were thinking, and so it was, they thought about bacteria, they thought about fungus, and finally they said it could be a virus, because viruses are used for gene transfer, and they do have that ability to mutate. So under certain circumstances, it is possible that such a virus mutates in a way that it becomes dangerous for a human brain. It's not likely, but it's possible.
But in the beginning, it's like, would you consider that the film can also be read as an indictment or a criticism to this society, the Prozac society? She created a flower. So the Portuguese title is The Flower for Happiness.
Well, I don't really, I wouldn't say it's a criticism, because I think all my films are trying to understand something about the human condition. And I think in all my films you have that observation that as humans we try to create those ideas that make life worth living. So I think we're very much addicted and we depend on those ideas, like happiness, for example. I believe if we would take off our sunglasses and see, then we would see that happiness is very much an idea. It's in our heads. It's a picture on my iPhone, but it's, as soon as I go there, it falls apart. Happiness is not something that can be easily grasped. It dissolves under your fingers. And still, we need that idea. It's like a reason to continue with your life, because you have those ideas in the back of your head. Like religion or love, so faith, love, and hope are those ideas, and
which you have explored in
my previous
films.
films. Absolutely. And I do not. That's why I say that it's not really a criticism. It's more an understanding of that we need those ideas, and even if they are ridiculous, and we agree they don't exist, but still they are very real.
Did you also want to question this difficulty women have, because they have at the same time to educate and create their children, and in many countries they have to give up their careers, the things that they would like to do, and that's more difficult for them to have an equilibrium with this?
Well, I don't think they have to give up their career. The interesting question for me was also, why do they give up their career? It's really a big question which I cannot fully answer, but I have the impression that it is bound to that feelings of guilt that are described in my film. And we all know that if there are some rules in a society, of course you internalize them. So in the end you think, oh, it's my feeling of guilt. But maybe if you take a closer look, you will understand that it's our society that has that image of motherhood, where we still expect a mother to love her child more than anything else. We don't expect that from a father, so there's a difference in that image of motherhood and fatherhood. And I think in my film I'm just trying to say that it is possible that a mother loves her child and as well loves something else in life, for example, being a scientist.
And one of the things I like very much in your films, and in this one especially, is the composition of the frame. How do you work that?
The composition of the frame is, I think there is one basic idea behind it, which is that the camera work in my films is very independent. It's not a camera that follows the action, that follows the actors necessarily, but sometimes the camera loses them out of frame. For example, you have those shots where the camera approaches two people talking to each other, but then the camera continues and loses them out of frame and focuses on the curtain in the background, which is ridiculous. But it is an irony in the film, because the whole film is about a puzzle where somebody lost some of the pieces and you cannot give the full picture. There is a missing link, and I'm trying to focus on that, on saying, okay, this is part of the story I'm able to tell you, but even I don't know the real truth, because maybe there are several truths.
I think we could now open to the audience.
Any reason why the film is shot in English and these people car driving to the not European way of driving?
I decided to make the film in English language in quite an early stage, since there is a gameful or a playful treatment of genre in that film. I had the feeling it helps that irony, or it helps to convey this playing around with genre films if I shoot the film in English language, because those original genre films were shot in English language, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's an English-speaking novel, English-written novel. So I thought it helps that idea to play around with genre film.
I
Hi, thank you for the film. I just wanted to ask about the sound. It's very, very interesting, and I was just wondering about the process of sound design, because it's really, really, it's very peculiar. I don't know, so yeah, a bit more.
Yes, it's peculiar. The music in the film, so during the film it's all composed by one composer, Teiji Ito. He's Japanese, and he was also composing the music for some of the films of Maya Deren in the 1940s. She was an experimental filmmaker in New York. I love her films a lot, so she's a big influencer of my work. And also in her films are very dreamlike, surrealist. It's a very nightmarish atmosphere that is created, and part of it in her films is also the music. And her films are not at all based in Asia or anything, so it's also with her films a sort of this match. We see that white American woman in an ambience of America, and then you have this Japanese music with it. So there is a gap between those two cultures, and I thought that this is something very interesting, because I'm not trying to find a music that is just supporting the scenes or the suspense of the film. Like what we said about the camera work, the camera is an actor of its own, and also is the music. It's also some independent player in the film, and sometimes the music goes well with the scenes, sometimes it's a bit odd or too much of it or slightly embarrassing. So you don't really know how to take this, and it also adds to that uncertainty that is created. It's not a very, like, the interpretation of what you see is quite open. You don't get that 100% information how you should take the scene, and this is something I find very interesting. It opens up a window in your head, I think.
Hello, congratulations for your excellent film. Do you think we can look at the film or read it or look at the flower as a metaphor for the smartphones and the social media, or the way we connect with social media and we disconnect from the real world, or the way we express our feelings in this media world or Facebook or something like that, and the kind of addiction we have for technology and the way we feel emotions outside of it? Or is just my reading, or is it possible?
No, I think you're right. I think there is a more universal base to the film, which might be that in any society, I think it is true that human beings are very much influenced. So manipulation is normal and pretending is normal in any society. I think that is what makes it possible that we live together, is that we lie to each other. This is a very basic tool of our communication. Otherwise, we would kill each other constantly. So we have to have those rules of pretending and lying, and also, I think, of manipulating. But every society has different tools how we are manipulating ourselves or each other. And you're right, in our society, what is very specific and interesting is that the manipulation is so invisible. So there is not one dictator that dictates what we have to think through propaganda, but the propaganda is very subtle. It's in the social media, it's in the internet, it's in the television shows, it's in the commercials. It's a very, it's hard to notice. There's not the obvious enemy, he's the asshole, but it's a much more invisible way of influence. And that is quite spooky, because that makes it hard to detect it, to understand, oh, here I see I am influenced, I'm manipulated.
Congratulations for your film. Eu gostaria, será que posso pôr a questão em português?
Sim.
Sim. Eu gostaria de dizer que estive a ver o filme e lembrei-me que, de facto, há uma empresa transnacional, ou até mais que uma, que já produzem sementes inférteis. Mas a ideia é que os agricultores, para a próxima colheita, necessitam de continuar a ser clientes da mesma empresa, uma vez que as sementes não se reproduzem e, portanto, eles não podem reservar uma parte da colheita para continuar a produzir. Isso torna-os dependentes da empresa e, indiretamente, as pessoas que são alimentadas por eles. Isso levanta um problema social e político que tem sido debatido. Monsanto, por exemplo, eu não queria fazer propaganda à empresa, mas será a Monsanto e se calhar outra, mas a Monsanto eu ouvi falar, I heard about that.
Yeah, of course, that's very interesting. I don't know if you remember, there's one scene in the film where Alice and her collaborator Chris, they have that discussion in the canteen, and Chris he's saying exactly that. He's saying, okay, the plants that we produce have to be infertile because it's a protection so that the plants do not reproduce in nature. But it is also a commercial tool, of course. It also makes the buyers depending on buying new seeds because the seeds are infertile. It's both. It's exactly, I think, what the two of them say in that scene. So it's a very ambiguous situation. It is for the benefit, but it's also for the commercial success of a plant.
So just one more question, and then we have to leave for the next screening. No? Then thank you all. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.